5.4 Create Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS. Create Work Breakdown Structure is a process of subdividing project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. The key benefit of this process is that it provides a framework of what has to be delivered. The process is performed once or at predefined points in the project, as from PMBOK Guide page 156. The topic for this section is the Work Breakdown Structure, of course, or WBS, and it's one of my favourite parts of the PMBOK Guide. I'm not sure why that is. It looks plain on the outside, but there's lots of interesting things happening on the inside, and it's almost universally misunderstood. Yeah, I suppose it's like me in a lot of ways. And it is one of PMI's favourite parts of the PMBOK Guide as well. You can tell that by how often it appears in the examination questions. In fact, I often say to my students, if work breakdown structure appears in the answers for a question, it is probably the right answer. However, as I said, I believe it is one of the least understood topics in the PMBOK Guide, even by project managers who routinely use a work breakdown structure. I've trained almost 2,000 project managers for PMP and for general project management, and I've never yet found a single project manager who knows all of these details. In fact, most know about 1/4. One of my students had a PhD in project management and was a senior lecturer in project management. He knew about half. And so by the end of this video, you will know more than most project managers in the world about the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is created in the project scope management knowledge area, of course, in Create WBS. But in order to understand it fully, we also have to look at part of the project schedule management knowledge area. And if you've never heard of project schedule management knowledge area before, it's because since 1992 it has always been called time management or project time management. However, the PMBOK Guide review team for the 6th edition, they decided that you can't actually manage time. Time progresses at a steady rate, therefore the only thing that you can manage in that is what you do with that time, i.e. the schedule, and that's why the knowledge area is now called Project Schedule Management. The different parts of the work breakdown structure have strange names, and all of them can and do appear in the PMP exam. And most of them appear on the CAPM exam too, at Certified Associate Project Management. The reason why not all of the questions appear on the CAPM exam are twofold. But before I explain why, I will give you a very brief overview of the differences between the two certifications. The PMP certification is intended for experienced project managers, and that's why you have to prove you have sufficient project management experience before you can attempt the exam. The PMP certification is renewable every 3 years by accumulating 60 professional development units, or PDUs, within the 3-year cycle. Note that you do not have to be a member of PMI in order to maintain your PMP, but I would strongly recommend that there are very many benefits from being a member of PMI. This contrasts with the Prince 2 2017 practitioner certification, which now requires 60 education hours to renew the certification, but with Prince 2 you must accumulate at least 20 hours per year, whereas PMP is just 60 over 3 years. You can accumulate them in the last week if you want, and you must be a member of XLOS to maintain your Prince 2 certification, Prince 217 certification, but you don't have to be a member of PMI to maintain your PMP. The CAPM certification is aimed at people who work in a project team and most likely aspire to becoming a project manager one day. The CAPM lasts for 5 years and it's not renewable because PMI expects you will have gained the necessary experience to attempt the PMP exam at this stage. Of course, you can choose to take the CAPM exam again at the end of 5 years. Okay, I said that some PMP questions on the work breakdown structure won't be asked in the CAPM. The reason why is that 100% of the questions on the CAPM exam can be answered by the PMBOK. So if you have a photographic memory, you memorize a PMBOK, you've passed the CAPM exam. But on the PMP exam, it is estimated that at most 60% of the questions can be answered by knowing the PMBOK guide and by working as a project manager. The other 40% will come from study courses and books, such as the study course. But if you choose the wrong course, it's not going to cover the 40% that you need. There is a long history to the exams and how they are marked, and I've lived through all of them. It would take too long to cover today, but I would just say two things about the pass mark. I'm often asked this question. The pass mark for the PMP exam used to vary widely from 67% to 82%. Then sometime back, PMI decided to keep the pass mark for the PMP exam a secret. So now you are aiming at a target that you can't see. My advice, gained from many years' experience, is to buy access to a number of PMP mock exams. But make sure that the mock exams are aligned with the 6th edition of the PMBOK guide, or you will simply confuse yourself. And once you achieve 80% or more on 3 consecutive tests, you are probably ready for the real examination. The other reason why not all PMP work breakdown structure questions can appear on the CAPM exam is that the CAPM exam questions are straightforward, but the PMP questions include many scenario style questions. The PMP exam has a number of straightforward questions too. For example, a question such as a deliverable at the lowest level of a work breakdown structure is called, and that's obviously a work package, and that can appear on either of the examinations. Okay, but now let's have a look at the work breakdown structure. What is a work breakdown structure? It's a graphical representation of the scope statement, and you'll find that in the examination too. Sometimes they'll ask for what is a graphical representation, or what is a picture, or what is a diagrammatical representation of the scope statement, and it's a work breakdown structure. If it asks for a narrative description of the scope, that's the scope statement, because narrative is just writing our words. And that is why it is created in the scope management knowledge area, because it's just another way of viewing the scope. Research proves that almost everyone thinks better in pictures. I worked with someone who couldn't think in pictures, but I've only ever known that one person. If you were to give him the simplest diagram, he would just stare at it and say, what does it mean? But you give him 13 type sheets and he would pick it up and just go through it and understand it right away. And that's why diagrams are so popular for presenting information. And the purpose of the work breakdown structure is to break the main deliverables of the project into work packages so you can actually create the work. A work breakdown structure is a very useful tool and vitally important on all but really small projects. But when I first heard of a work breakdown structure, the name confused me, because work sounds like doing things like activities. I'm going to work today. But one of the most important points, and listen very carefully, about the work breakdown structure is that work in a work breakdown structure means deliverables, not activities. If you're familiar with Prince 2, the work breakdown structure is very similar to the Prince 2 product breakdown structure. And so when you're working with a work breakdown structure, always remember you are always working with deliverables or products and never with activities. I've had many project managers argue with me that work on the work breakdown structure can include activities. And in fact, there's one time when I was running a PMP training course, I had a guest speaker there. He was going through the work breakdown structure and he started putting activities in it, and I had to stop him and say, that's not how it's done. And he said, but many organizations do it this way. But that's not the point. When in doubt, always check the PMBOK guide. It doesn't matter what your organization does, what the instructor in your training course said, what your taxi driver said about it. When it comes to the PMP exam, the PMBOK is always 100% correct. Now let's look at what the PMBOK says about work. in the scope management area, it says work refers to work products or deliverables that are the result of activity and not the activity itself. So that's straight from the PMBOK guide, and I think that's pretty clear. Work means deliverables. Before we start drawing a work breakdown structure, let's have a look at the inputs. Create work breakdown structure inputs. Input number 1, project management plan. A project management plan component we can use is a scope management plan, which documents how the work breakdown structure will be created from the project scope statement. Input number 2, project documents. Examples of project documents that can be considered as inputs for this process would include the project scope statement, which describes the work that will be performed and the work that is excluded. Requirements documentation, which describes how individual requirements meet the business need for the project. Input number 3, enterprise environmental factors. And the enterprise environmental factors that can influence the Create work breakdown structure would be the industry-specific work breakdown structure standards that are relevant to the nature of the project. These industry-specific standards may serve as external reference sources for creating the work breakdown structure. Input number 4, organizational process assets. The organizational process assets that can influence the Create WBS process include policies, procedures and templates for the WBS. Project files from previous projects and lessons learned from previous projects. And just to remind you that a template can be a work breakdown structure that you've created for a previous similar project, and you bring that out from your historical records and then you change it to suit this one. So that way you're not starting from scratch. Because for example, if you're building an office block or something like that, then if you have a work breakdown structure for a single floor, you can take that whole section of the work breakdown structure to use. Create work breakdown structure tools and techniques. Number 1, the ever popular expert judgment. Expertise should be considered from individuals or groups with knowledge or experience with similar projects. Makes a lot of sense. Tools and techniques. Number 2, decomposition, because that's the main thing you're going to do on the work breakdown structure. Decomposition is a technique used for dividing and subdividing the project scope and project deliverables into smaller, more manageable parts. The work package is the work defined at the lowest level of the work breakdown structure for which cost and duration can be estimated and managed, and that's a frequent question of the examination. The level of decomposition is often guided by the degree of control needed to effectively manage the project. The level of detail for work packages will vary with the size and complexity of the project. If an agile approach is used, epics can be decomposed into user stories. Let's start drawing our work breakdown structure. There are many ways to draw a work breakdown structure. You could have mind maps and all sorts of things, but I will use the most common version, and that's a hierarchical form, similar to an organizational chart, usually abbreviated to an org chart. At the top, we will place the deliverable of the project. In our case, we've chosen a house. Obviously, a house is too complex for people to deliver, and so we need to break the product down. The process of repeatedly breaking a product down into simpler components is called decomposing. Let's decompose the main product into main sub-deliverables. We have number 1, the foundation, number 2, the roof, number 3, the walls, number 4, the exterior. Remember, I promised to teach you some strange new words. Do you know the name of the main sub-deliverables? You need to know these for the examination. So that's, on ours it's the foundation, the roof, the walls and the interior. They are called the control accounts. The foundation is a control account, the roof is a control account, the walls are a control account, and the interior is a control account. Now, you may be thinking that I've just possibly made a mistake here because I seem to be building the roof before the walls have been built. But no, I haven't made a mistake. the work breakdown structure is not time ordered, and that's important for the examination too. It can't be, because it won't be until we create our schedule that we will know for sure which order the products will be delivered. Now you probably think that you don't need a schedule to tell you that you can't put a roof on if you don't have any walls to sit on top of. But that's only because it's very obvious in this case. And to be honest, when I create a work breakdown structure, I generally organise it in the approximate order that the products will be delivered. But when you get down to tens or hundreds of work packages on a complex project, you can't tell the order for certainty, and you would have to change the work breakdown structure every time you change the order of one deliverable or another. But as I said before, we are focusing on passing the PMP exam. The PMBOK guide is always right. Now, we've decomposed our products down into major sub-deliverables or control accounts. We ask the question, do we understand how to deliver each of these control accounts? In each case, the answer is no, so we must decompose further. Okay, let's have a look at the foundation first. We need prepared land first. They need to place steel mesh for reinforcing the concrete, and we have the concrete itself. This time I've placed them in the order which I think they'll be done, but they could have been placed in any order because the work breakdown structure is not time ordered. Why does it say land prepared, mesh installed, and concrete laid instead of prepare land, install mesh and lay concrete? It's because, remember I said before, every item on the work breakdown structure is a deliverable, but prepare land, install mesh and lay concrete, they are activities. You must always make it very clear in the wording that they are deliverables. Some deliverables are problematic because in English the deliverable and the activity to produce the deliverable is in fact the same word. For example, plumbing. That could mean the pipes and taps in the house, or it could mean the activity of installing pipes and taps. In this case, you would say something like plumbing completed or plumbing installed, so there's no misunderstanding. When you're creating a work breakdown structure, you must check that every entry on it is a noun. That's the easy way to check. And we could similarly decompose the other control accounts. I've left the last one with a question mark to represent the others that we need. Earlier I mentioned work packages, and these are basically sub-deliverables that are simple enough to be understood and to be produced. If we have a look at 1.2, mesh installed, you can cut steel mesh to fit inside an excavation and maybe weld the sections together. That is simple enough to be understood, to be produced, and so we have a work package. 1.3, concrete laid. A truck will pour concrete. It just needs to be spread over the mesh and smoothed, which we call screeding. Again, clearly, this is a work package. We can understand what needs to be done. We can do it. A work package does not get decomposed any further. But when we look at 1.1, land prepared, it looks like it might need some decomposition. And so we come to another word. Deliverable that needs to be decomposed further is called a planning package. So land prepared is a planning package. Let's decompose it. We have arrived at work packages, so we don't have to do any more on this control account. But what about these numbers? What do they mean? This numbering system has two purposes. Firstly, it helps you find your way around the work breakdown structure. If someone mentions work package 4.3.2.1 on our house project, you would immediately know it is part of the interior and part of the plumbing. And it is the first work package in the second planning package. The second purpose for the numbering structure is to do with finances. But first I will tell you some more strange words. The numbering system used on the work breakdown structure is called, can you guess? It's called the Code of Accounts. So if you know anything about financial accounting, you may be thinking that Code of Accounts sounds very like Chart of Accounts in the general ledger. and that's because the work breakdown structure code of accounts is mapped to the chart of accounts in the organisation's general ledger. And so if you give a work package reference or planning package reference or control account reference to the accountant, they should be able to provide you with all the financial information about that particular entity. For example, the amount of budget expended on it. All of the things can appear on the exam, but when was the last time you saw this information in a PMP training course? And that's why at Grey Campus we focus on all the important things that you're likely to come across. PMBOK is not prescriptive about the code of accounts. You can use numbers or letters or numbers and letters or anything you want really, as long as it's meaningful to your organisation and achieves its main purpose. So there's our first work breakdown structure. It still has planning packages to be decomposed and then it will be complete. It's time for another strange term. As you can see from the work breakdown structure, you can actually start building the house before you've decomposed all the planning packages. You could complete the foundation and build the walls while you're finalising the other work packages. Starting a project with planning packages still in the work breakdown structure that need to be further decomposed is called rolling wave project management. But at this stage you're probably wondering, where are the activities? If you include activities in the work breakdown structure, as some project managers do, the technical term for this is a dog's breakfast. Our first major point today was that the work breakdown structure shows only deliverables or products, and we represent them by nouns. Okay, we can draw a line onto the work breakdown structure to prevent any activities from creeping into it. Now, to complete this, we would actually have to leave the project scope management knowledge area and slip into project schedule management, which, as I said before, was called project time management in previous versions of the PMBOK. And the area that we'll be working in is define activities. The PMBOK guide tells us that define activities is the process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverables. The key benefit of this process is that it decomposes work packages into schedule activities. So that confirms that we're in the right place. Our next step is to create another chart below the work breakdown structure. The chart is called the activity list, and for each work package in the work breakdown structure you decompose it into the activities required to produce it. But what we're going to do now is we'll have to move on. We will come back to this in the schedule management and then we can see how the activity list is created. But what we need to do now is come back to create work breakdown structure and we'll examine the outputs. Create work breakdown structure outputs. Output number 1 is the scope baseline. Important term for the examination, scope baseline. The scope baseline is a combination of 3 things. It is the approved version of the scope statement, the work breakdown structure, and its associated work breakdown structure dictionary, which can be changed only through formal change control and is used as a basis for comparison. It is a component of the project management plan. Components of the scope baseline include project scope statement. The project scope statement includes the description of the project scope, major deliverables, assumptions and constraints. The work breakdown structure is a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of the work to be carried out by the project team to accomplish the project objectives and create the required deliverables. Each descending level of the work breakdown structure represents an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. Work package. The lowest level of the work breakdown structure is a work package with a unique identifier which we saw was part of the code of accounts. These identifiers provide a structure for hierarchical summation of costs, schedule and resource information. Each work package is part of a control account. A control account is a management control point where scope, budget and schedule are integrated and compared to the earned value for the performance measurement. A control account has two or more work packages. Each work package is associated with a single work control account. Planning package. A control account may include one or more planning packages. A planning package is a work breakdown structure component below the control account and above the work package with known work content but without detailed schedule activities. Work breakdown structure. This is an important one as well. The work breakdown structure is a document that provides detailed deliverable activity and scheduling information about each component in the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure dictionary is a document that supports work breakdown structure. Most of the information included in the work breakdown structure dictionary is created by other processes and added to this document at a later stage. Information in the work breakdown structure dictionary may include code of account identifier, description of work, assumptions and constraints, responsible organization, scheduled milestones, associated schedule activities, resources required, cost estimates, quality requirements, acceptance criteria, technical references and agreement information. Output number 2, project document updates. The project documents that may be updated as a result of carrying out this process include the assumption log, because it's updated with additional assumptions or constraints that were identified during the Create Work Breakdown Structure process. Requirements documentation, because it may be updated to include approved changes resulting from the Create Work Breakdown Structure process. I've found actually that quite often when creating a work breakdown structure, you think of something that was missed out on the scope statement, and so you have to start raising change requests to get the scope statement changed and so on. Okay, this is the end of Create Work Breakdown Structure. The next lesson is 5.5, Validate Scope. Please read the corresponding chapter in the Pinbook guide before watching the video.